Greetings, this is Jazz for Jazz Reviews with the top 5 medieval video games. Through the ages of numerous medieval strategy games, only a handful of them have become names we remember in its genre, and with only a pinch that lie outside of real-time strategy. Many games may be considered medieval in nature, but most hold fantasy elements of magic and dragons. So for the sake of truly medieval video games, fantasy titles are disqualified. That includes The Witcher 2. Kicking off at number 5. Authentic and as medieval as they come, the non-fictional War of the Roses. I've personally invested countless amount of hours into humiliating little peasants and their bows. The headman's axe was paramount to decapitating as many foes as possible. Then it was nerfed, heavily reducing its damage, so I moved on and fell in love with a great English two-handed sword. Matched with heavy plate armor, there was a time I'd jump into warriors and butcher them all.
Mega kill spree!
Well, then that was patched. Now the game's as balanced as it's ever been. These days I have to stand in line like everyone else and willingly accept my decapitation. As a multiplayer-only game, War of the Roses centers around the battle between the Lancastrians and the Yorkists, and all with very descriptive real-life details for all its weaponry. The combat system features a counter mechanic in which you actually had to move the mouse at whatever direction and right-click to block the enemy blow. It took a lot of getting used to, with reflexes that had to be spot on, and one-on-one battles could take a serious amount of time depending on the level of player skill. In all-out team deathmatch, lancemen, bowmen, and even single-shot guns now complicate its warfare.
Headshot!
Sword fights are always hectic, and there is an element of realism despite how floaty the mechanics can be. The angle and speed of swing filter into how much damage your player dishes out. And the phenomenal customization options are by no means purely cosmetic. Certain armors offer more protection, whilst the trade-off severely limits speed. Everything from the chink of plate and crease of chainmail to the vulnerable gaps of helmet visors are taken into account. We don't get to see these kind of games all that often, so for third-person melee combat, swear fealty to War of the Roses. It doesn't get much better than this. Why do I suck so badly at I knocked off my own teammate? God, my face! At number 4.
For your honor!
Encompassing both city and resource building with intense real-time strategy combat. Stronghold.
Try some of this.
With both military and economic campaigns, Stronghold was surprisingly complex for a game released in 2001. There was astounding levels of detail boiling down to the numerous siege elements, or more charming dynamics of town building. It was such an immersive game that never took itself too seriously. The storyline for one was ridiculous and good fun.
Run away, little chicken. I'm going to clip your wings.
Defenses were expansive. Multiple scenarios could even be played where you'd be expected to take on massive fortresses and deploy all kinds of units from siege towers to underground tunnelers.
Into the blackness!
Once the enemy lord was killed, victory was yours. Graphically, it may look a little rough around its 2D edges, but this was the most highly rated of the series. At number 3. For Honor and Glory. Take up your sword and jump into Chivalry's fray of unmerciful, ruthless savagery.
Oh, fucking hell.
As the unhealthy first-person alternative to War of the Roses, Chivalry's in-your-face brutality is anything but chivalrous. It's fucking badass. Ranging from cowardly bowmen, have you no honor, blasted bowmen, agile swordsmen to massive halberd-wielding vanguards and battle-axe-toting knights. There's plenty of outlets to choose from in disemboweling those sissy archers that stand at the back of the battlefield. But whatever soldier and unlock class you choose, the harsh reality of dismemberment is always funny. The game is very fast-paced, which may appear to lack any form of etiquette, but Chivalry demands well-timed reactions for its meaty attacks. And when the two groups collide, anything can happen in its frantic mess of mosh pit madness. The objective modes show a sadistic touch of humor and deviate far from just a simple team deathmatch. The game is set in a fictional medieval world, but the combat seems all the more realistic for Chivalry.
You all traitor!
In all-out medieval warfare, Chivalry is evil in its approach to throw you into the horrors of melee combat, with a big thanks to its terrifying sound design and fluid animations. Haha, take that, you Coulson. Haha. Yes! Yes, yes! No, no! Die! Haha, not today, Death. Not today. Fuck. No! You son of a whore. And should you ever grow tired of its medieval constraints, the latest DLC offers 5 new classes in the stupidly awesome bloodbath of pirates, ninjas, Spartans, Vikings, and samurais in a number of fresh environments. But for the battle of your wallets, Chivalry and Roses are very different games, and War of the Roses is now essentially free. Into the fray. Come on. Good day to you, sir. At number 2. In a time when pissing off the Pope had consequences. Medieval 2 Total War. The recipe between turn-based and real-time strategy is a recipe only Total War has perfected. Occasionally, spanning from the Middle East to the entirety of Europe and Africa, every aspect of ruling a medieval kingdom is covered. Diplomatic and religious decisions are just as important as militaristic ones. The papal election can make or break an empire, through supporting the faith in constructing religious buildings and completing religious missions. Once one of your priests reaches cardinal, this will grant your nation a spot in the next election. But should your sworn enemy make pope, it's likely they'll call for a crusade against all of your provinces. This would be disastrous for everything your men bled for, as all of the Catholic nations will be expected to invade your lands, regardless of whether or not the pope is an old bumbling fool controlled by a spiteful enemy. In all of this, a very delicate amount of planning and complex diplomacy can prevent your demise. The logistical micromanagement of its medieval campaign is one steep learning curve. It's easy enough to attack an enemy castle from the map, but another thing entirely when you're expected to play general in its real-time battles of mass warfare. Auto-resolving certain battles is not always a viable option. Naturally, you wouldn't rush cavalry into the teeth of spears and pikes, but when managing thousands of men at multiple points in a siege, it can all get a little overwhelming. Total War is a game that demands a mind for strategy and quick thinking. For strategy fans seeking an epic medieval experience, the Grand Campaign offers hundreds of hours in engrossing gameplay. And if this wasn't enough, the expansion integrates the Americas and a number of new campaigns, all for good measure. And don't forget the fully fledged multiplayer. And finally, at number 1, graphically impoverished and in some ways incredibly simple, Mount & Blade Warband. As the only real game of its kind, Warband enables the player to become whatever they please. Load up the game and answer but a few life questions and your epic adventure begins. Characteristics and skill levels will coincide with what you've told the game, but from there on in, the road ahead is whatever you make it. At first, you would begin by fulfilling quests for the various citizens and nobles in whatever location you chose. Most missions involve simple message deliveries and slaying groups of bandits. Of course, you're completely free to rob and steal for yourself as well. But once your reputation is high enough, the next step would be to find a king you feel like fighting for and join his entire war campaign. In amongst trading, looting, tournaments, and rescuing noblemen from captivity, Your good king may reward your services with small villages. But ultimately your goal is to forge your own faction, marry a princess or two, declare yourself king, and conquer all other nations. At least, that's what my character was hungry for, money and power. But bear in mind, I've barely scratched the surface here, this is just what I did. In its native form, Warband is very difficult to get into, but some features or political aspects of the game feel a tad basic. Any Warband player needs to have the Flores mod installed for this massively ambitious medieval simulation to feel fully fleshed out. With this added depth, the combat is glorious. Effectively, you are the frontline general, and as opposed to medieval Total War's mass RTS gameplay, Warband is the individual's perspective in a battle. By recruiting mercenaries or training an entire army of peasants into loyal knights, you can issue your men strategic commands to make for realistic and extremely satisfying medieval warfare. Formations, morale, and the types of weaponry used all factor into how a battle plays out. Even from miles away, one entirely random stray arrow can zip through the sky and hit your character in the skull, thus pulling you out of the action completely. In terms of castles, land, foliage, or interiors, the game is fuck ugly, there's no two ways about it. Now the multiplayer has potential, but given that the engine is so easily modded, it's also fairly prone to hacking. All too often you'll run into a fight and suffer a massive heart attack, consequently dying on the spot thanks to the enemy player's inability to play fair. But in placing aside Warband's obvious faults and unexplained learning curves, you may find yourself enriched with, and at the same time, annoyingly addicted by Warband's medievalism. The single player will pay you back in hundreds of hours gameplay. This has been Jazz for Jazz Reviews, and this has been the top 5 medieval video games. I do solemnly hope you enjoyed the video. Follow me all you wish on Twitter, which can be found in the description below. But for now, I take my leave. Fare thee well, good sirs, and I'll see thee in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.